Labelle's, a major provider of the government school lunch program that went into liquidation this week, has announced the sale of its lunch operation to Compass Group. Associate Education Minister David Seymour says the new school lunch program has been suffering from teething issues but is steadily improving. And he's with us this morning. Kia ora, good morning.
Good morning.
You have been accused by the opposition of deliberately tanking the school lunch program because you fundamentally oppose the policy to begin with. Are you?
No, and if that was truly my view, then I wouldn't have stood up week after week and solved problems as they've arrived and defended the progress that we're making. So I think, frankly, it shows an opposition that's not quite trying to present itself as an alternative government, but just take pot shots. And look, I've been in opposition too. I can give them free advice, but I doubt they'll take it. If you look at what's actually happened, we've adopted a system that was unsustainable. Budgets are made in 4-year cycles. Labor's budget, as they went out of government, did not have any money for the school lunch program in 2025, 2026 or any year subsequent. So the first thing we needed to do was find $340 million, either extra tax, cut spending $340 million elsewhere, or find a way to do this more efficiently. What we've done is we've basically halved the cost by doing it more efficiently. And yes, there's been problems, and we've been very upfront about that. What I think is really interesting is that it's shown two sides of New Zealand. One is to point out at every opportunity, this is terrible, this is wrong, it's a conspiracy, he's trying to deliberately sabotage it. The other is, yep, you know what, it's not what happens to you in life, it's how you deal with it. And each time there's been a problem, we've been upfront, we've solved it, and it's kept getting better.
There have been a lot of problems though, and I'll just do this list once. So, meals have failed to be delivered or have turned up late, interrupting tens of thousands or probably hundreds of thousands of learning hours. Teachers have been forced to scramble and buy pizzas and pies for their students. We've seen the torrent of images of totally unappealing meals, lunches described by students as resembling dog food. Meals with ham have been delivered to kids with halal diets. There have been meals with melted plastic in them, meals that are frozen solid, meals so hot they left one student with serious burns. If this rollout hasn't been deliberately bungled, is this the kind of delivery we should expect from a David Seymour policy?
Well, let me just first answer the deliberate bungled thing again. I mean, it's absolutely true that I campaigned against this policy. I don't think, as far as ACT's concerned, that it should exist, but I'm now in a coalition with two other parties who do want it to continue.
But when it comes to delivery, it's either malice or incompetence.
Yeah, well, in one of life's great ironies, the person who was opposed to the whole program is now responsible, but I'm part of a government. I do government policy to the best of my ability, and I take it very seriously. Now to go through that catalogue of criticisms that you just listed. First of all, yes, there were problems with on-time delivery in the first couple of weeks. Since then, we've been achieving 99 to 100% on-time delivery on most days.
This week, just to pick you up on that, this week it was 97.3% of lunches were delivered on time. Now that sounds good, but that across the week is roughly 500,000 lunches. So that means that 13,500 meals were delivered late, which means you have 13,500 students having their learning interrupted by a government policy from a government that said that our number one priority was reading, writing and maths, getting kids focused on learning. 13,500 just this week.
So I can do mental arithmetic too. It means that actually if 13,500 out of 500,000 were late, then 586,500 were delivered on time. We can play this game all day, but look...
But I mean, that's every week this year, right? So that's just this week, 13,500 students have their learning interrupted, and that's every single week this year we've seen late deliveries. So potentially hundreds of thousands of interrupted learning hours from a government that said it was focused on educational outcomes.
And what you've also seen is a starting couple of weeks where, on one day in one city, 11% were delivered on time in the first week. That's not good enough. We're now seeing 99 to 100,000 every day. And actually, if you think about how business and how life works, not many people are delivering at 99 to 100% every day. That's what we've been doing. This week, you say it was 97.3. That's true. There was one day of interruption on Wednesday when it was only 90% delivered on time. But again, there's two New Zealands, right? There's people who will want to nitpick and say, oh, but I've done the maths, it's 13,500. That's what 3% is, whatever. you're welcome to do that, but I tend to take the other view of life, that it's not what happens, it's how you deal with it. And actually, we've overcome all those problems to get to very high standards of performance. Your second point was around the quality.
You're forgetting the focus, though, right? The whole focus of your government was supposed to be getting kids learning, getting kids and educators focused on learning. And if just this week, 13,500 kids have had their learning interrupted by late meals, and you extrapolate that over this year, you're fundamentally undermining your number one priority in education.
I think let's be serious about this for a moment. What this government is doing is revamping the curriculum. We're revamping the qualifications. We're putting a huge amount of support into learning support and making it easier for kids to be supported as they go through their schooling journey. We're going to talk in a moment about what we're doing to totally revamp the over-regulation and red tape around early childhood education. So if you seriously believe, and we're going to talk about charter schools, now if you seriously believe that some school lunches showing up late, in some cases a few minutes late, is really what's holding us back, then I think we're not really having a serious conversation. But
I think actually hundreds of thousands of interrupted learning hours, I think, is a serious issue in the eyes of most New Zealanders. Now, under the previous issue, contractors were responsible for the meal distribution, for the rubbish collection, the recycling and the clean-up. Papatoetoe High School principal told me they're still being left to cover a lot of that stuff themselves. He estimated it's costing them $20,000 to $30,000 a year at the moment. Why?
Well, first of all, let's just go back to your earlier point. I mean, if you're seriously saying that New Zealanders are so helpless that we can't say, look, the meals are going to be a bit late, we'll keep learning, we'll get the meals when they arrive. I mean, I think you underestimate
So you get the meals when they arrive, all right, you've got a class of students, meals have arrived, guys, okay, so we stop learning, we go and have all the meals, okay, you've got you're having this one, you've got a halal meal, okay, we're doing all that, then you've got to clean it all up. That's all that time's lost learning time.
Yeah,
it's not like they're cancelling lunch hour, is it?
That's how lunch works, right? Is that you
Except they're not cancelling lunch hour beforehand. So you've got your lunch hour, your meal doesn't arrive, then you go back to class, you're sitting in class, oh, good news, kids, the meals have arrived, meals all come in, you go through the whole process. I mean, you don't understand how classrooms work if you can't see that that's, at the very least, incredibly distractionary.
Well, I actually believe that people can take initiative and say we're going to move our lunch hour, for example. That's something that you could do.
Except the schools don't always know that they're going to be late, right?
Well, actually, they do. They know.
They always know if they're going to be late.
They know if they've arrived. So again.
So hang on. So they know if they've arrived, right? So explain to me how a school can move its lunch hour before knowing if it's arrived.
Well, I'm not saying they can. I'm saying that they could be aware because, for example, and this is the two New Zealands, Jack. I mean, on the one hand,
two New Zealands, the kids who are having their learning interrupted and the kids who aren't.
No, the two New Zealands are the one where we nitpick over tiny details that you don't even know. You're just spitballing that maybe this is what happens. Or there's the one where people can say, look,
we've been speaking to educators all through this week, and I think it's been pretty widely reported, right? Look, let's just we're going to go on forever about the late thing.
Well, no.
But back to that point. So Papatoetoe High School says 20 to 30 grand a year. It's costing them an additional spending coming out of their own operational grant to fund the distribution of meals, the clean-up and all of that. How many schools are digging into their own pockets to cover the distribution, the rubbish, the clean-up that was previously being comprehensively covered under the last system?
Well, first of all, there is an obligation under the contract for the rubbish to be, or the used meals to be picked up afterwards. They do that twice a week. Second of all, there are some schools that say that it's too difficult to take meals from the school gate and give them to the students, and that's all far too difficult. There's also a lot of schools that are managing that just fine. In any event, the Ministry of Education is giving some compensation to schools in order to do that if they feel that they can't. But once again, the meals show up, provided for free by the taxpayer at the school gate. It's not beyond the wits of people in New Zealand to be able to distribute meals to students who we are told are so hungry that this is the only meal that they're getting, and then take them back.
It costs money though, right? If you've got people distributing them, that costs money. And in some cases it's educators, so in some cases it's teachers or principals that should be focusing on education who are distributing.
I've visited schools where, for example, the students have, and this was under the old model, the students have taken the initiative, and it's the students who deliver the meals, and actually they take real pride. It's actually an exercise that they've learned a lot from. Well, in this case, it's
reading, writing and maths.
In this case, the students have managed to organise their time and do something that's taught them a lot about business, sustainability and logistics. Now, I actually see that as a positive thing, but what keeps happening time and again is that we're told that somehow New Zealanders are so helpless and powerless that somehow they can't solve these problems. Actually, I hear a huge amount of feedback from schools who are solving these problems, who are able to get meals from the school gate to the children and back without it being a major disruption. And if we just had a bit more of that spirit, who knows what we might achieve as a country.
So just back to my question, how many schools are topping up the cost of the school lunch program through their operational grant?
So we don't have that information because that would be decisions made by a large number of schools. That information hasn't been assembled in one central place. But I would like an opportunity to respond to your earlier list of challenges around the quality of the lunches, because those, and we haven't had a chance to talk about that since you raised it, that too is an issue where we've acknowledged challenges and we've overcome them. So yes, there have been a lot of shortages of meals. As a result, they've been bringing in substitutions, and some of the issues that have arisen, such as the burning of plastic, for example, they occurred because there were meals that had been substituted in due to a lack of supply that wouldn't have otherwise been in the system. Now, with the closure of Labelle and the takeover of that facility, this week they've been up to 50,000 meals a day towards the end of the week. Their target is to get to 70,000. At that point, you don't have more substitutions. You're not going to have, some of the runs of repetitive meals because they'll be making the meals that they were originally contracted for, and those quality issues go away. And this again, we've got on-time delivery. That was a problem. We've solved it. You can play all the game. You can play
13,500 kids this week would disagree with that.
Actually, no, it wasn't, because it was.
Well, I'm taking from Ministry of Education data. We talked about Friday.
Because it's across 5 days. So it's
13,500 kids across 5 days.
Across 5 days.
Would disagree that you're getting it on time.
So actually, if you want to do more mental arithmetic, that's what 2,600 and 2,700 a day
from a government that was focused on education,
2,700 a day out of
maths.
800,000 students, Jack. I mean, this is how absurd this line of questioning is. But can we get back to the quality? There's been a problem with quality that we're overcoming.
Okay,
and this is what we do.
I'm glad you're
time
overcoming
and again.
it. Okay, so the lunch delivered to Massey Primary School on Friday was frozen, rock solid. The school's holding a board meeting this week to consider withdrawing from the program, not because they don't need the lunches, but because they can't rely on them. If schools want to withdraw from the program and seek support in the community to subsidise the program, would you commit to giving them $3 per head that currently funds the school lunch program?
No, we're not going to do that because we have a system in place that delivers those meals. We've contracted for the price. We're good to go. But I just make the point, we had a school last week that made a big song and dance about they're pulling out. They made the announcement on their social media. They got overwhelmed by parents and students saying, no, don't do this, we want the lunches. And guess what? On Monday, they're going to be receiving them again. So, I think part of this whole saga is that it's shown the way that people decide to jump on every little detail of the largest food delivery program in New Zealand history, when in reality, there's a whole lot of people who say, we enjoy these meals. Many people say they're better than what we had last year, when they're getting on-time delivery, when the quality is improving, especially as we get rid of the wrinkle that's caused most of the problems. So it's actually a positive story.
Let's talk procurement, right? So Business Desk revealed that after Labelle's and Compass were shortlisted for your program, officials in the Ministry of Education raised concerns about their performance. And it's a litany of performance issues. So between 2021 and 2024, both companies lost supply contracts with almost 60% of the schools on their books. They both went through performance management with mixed results. In the second half of 2023, Compass had failed more than half of its nutrition standard tests, and data, quote, indicated prolonged issues with undersized meals, inconsistent portioning and meals not meeting nutrition standards. As the Minister responsible, what due diligence did you do regarding the companies in the School Lunch Collective?
Well, again, I take advice from the Ministry of Education and from the expert advisory group.
So did you explicitly ask your officials about the previous performance of both Compass and Labelle's?
Well, of course, and the reassurances that these guys can deliver. And again, people can jump all over, well, we found something that they did wrong in the previous system or school meal program. However, if you're to look carefully, there were 7, and this is one of the things I asked about, there were 7 food safety inquiries in the old school lunch program. None of them were into Labelle or Compass.
Did you ask about the performance management results?
No, I didn't ask about that.
Right.
There were 40%.
Should you have?
Well, no, I don't think so, because actually...
You shouldn't have said, these companies that we've chosen went through performance management, what were the results of the performance management?
No, because what I'm more focused on is how are they performing now, and actually the performance for the largest food program that New Zealand's ever had, we have taken something and we've halved the cost. That's doubling productivity is what New Zealand needs to do if we're going to actually achieve the goals that we have as a country to be wealthier, happier and healthier. We're going to need to do things smarter and better. I think halving the cost and delivering the same quality is a pretty good achievement.
Well, I think most people would strongly disagree that the same quality has been delivered across the board. Can you guarantee that you will see the year out with this program with the current providers? Compass obviously having bought out Labelle.
I see no reason why we wouldn't. I mean,
Can you guarantee that?
Well, of course I can't, because we don't know what might happen in the future. There could be all sorts of events that we can't foresee. However, right now I see absolutely no reason why that would not be the case. And it's frankly a very good opportunity to show how we can roll out the biggest food program in New Zealand history, that we can halve the cost, double productivity and deliver the same quality. Now, you say you disagree with that. I didn't say
I disagree with that. I mean, I read you the issues. We've all seen the pictures, and you saying it's the same quality, I think many people would reasonably disagree with your assessment.
Well, actually, you know, Jan Tinetti, the Labour spokesperson, got caught out.
She's not the Labour spokesperson?
Well, actually, she was when she did the thing that I was going to talk about before you cut me off, Jack.
She showed a photo from the previous, under the Labour government. She showed a photo of a lunch and said, this looks unappealing.
Yes, she did. And here's something else that media could do. They could go out and interview children, the other 75% whose parents make their lunches, and say, what do you think about the quality of that?
Then they
could interview the parents and say, oh, are your kids sufficiently grateful for the meals you're providing? I think you get some priceless answers. Well, here's another thing.
Let me ask you about parents. This is my last thing. Let me ask about the parents, because you've said repeatedly it's the parents' responsibility to feed their kids. And I reckon many or most people watching would 100% agree. The problem is that for whatever reason, kids were going hungry, right? So if parents weren't feeding their kids, what are you doing about that problem?
Well, first of all, I just ask, to complete the thought. The other thing the media could do is go the other 180 days a year when schools aren't open and ask what sort of meals are being provided to the same children that are eligible for the school lunch program.
Back to that question,
but if you're concerned about overall wealth and poverty and inequality in New Zealand, the government has a range of initiatives. Probably the most important one in my mind is that we are replacing the Resource Management Act, and we're getting serious about funding core infrastructure so we can build more homes affordably. And why does that matter? Because if you look at the last 40 years, the poorest households have gone from spending about a quarter of their income on housing to over half their income on housing. Now, until you solve that problem, no amount of tax and transfer, no amount of benefits, no amount of anything, frankly, is going to solve your underlying problem.
It's interesting that you see it as a poverty issue as opposed to a responsibility issue as such. So charter schools, and last year in the budget you set aside money for 35 state schools to convert to charter schools in 25-26. How many state schools have converted?
Well, at this point, we haven't converted any because basically we had a very tight run-in from the budget last year.
How many have applied to convert then for next year?
There's about a dozen who are currently in talks with the Ministry of Education.
Only a dozen?
Well, let's just see how it rolls out.
Well, hang on, you put aside money for 35.
But when you
said there was, quote, huge demand for schools who might want to convert from being a state school to a charter school. You put money aside in the budget for 35 state schools. That money has been allocated, and you've only received applications for a dozen?
Well, actually, I'm not saying we've received allocations.
Haven't even received formal applications for a dozen?
What I'm saying is that we're in discussions with schools who may wish to convert. I think to be able to convert schools in 6 months with a totally new concept.
But this is for next year as well, right?
Yeah, and this year's only just beginning, so I suspect that you'll get a lot more applications as the year goes on. The fact is that we have an opportunity here to allow educators to operate behind a contract without the kind of political interference that often worries them, to be held accountable for student achievement and student attendance, and that is a very appealing prospect for educators, also for parents.
If you've put money aside for 35, be frank with us, you've put money aside for 35, it's been open for 8 months now, right? did you expect that more state schools would apply, or at the very least talk to the ministry about converting? Because just 12 seems very few.
Well, first of all, I think it's actually a bit more than that, but it's at least a dozen that I know of that are in talks with the ministry. Second of all, there's no way of knowing how popular the uptake of a totally novel concept is going to be.
You did say huge demand. Those are your words. But my question is just, did you expect it to be more popular?
No,
at this stage?
No, because you don't really have a basis for deciding how many you should expect. What I know is that it's a great opportunity for state schools, and I talk to them all the time. They say there's a whole lot of frustrations we have in our dealing with the Ministry of Education. There's a whole lot of frustration with constant change of policy. We'd love the flexibility to be able to teach our way and do it better. There's a huge demand from parents who want better options, and they're seeing that in the new charter schools, the 7 that have so far opened. People are literally moving cities to go to charter schools because they're not getting what they want for their kid where they are now.
Charter schools are very small roles. I mean, you put aside money for 15 new charter schools and 35 converts. You've got 7 new ones, and I'm sure there'll be some new ones that establish themselves for next year, but just a dozen converts. Hey, in a couple of minutes, we're going to talk regulation.
I mean, you've got 78 people applied to operate charter schools. You want to talk
but
about
it's the conversion. I mean, you put aside money for 35 state schools to convert, and just 12 are talking to the ministry.
That's a maximum envelope that you can handle.
Yeah, but it just, just 12 are talking to the ministry of all the schools in New Zealand. What do you want to achieve with a regulatory standards bill?
I want to put the rights of New Zealanders to own, use and exchange property in the law, so that if you're somebody who wants to invest in today so that you can have a better tomorrow, that you know that you're not going to get some crazy law that's going to restrict it. You know that if you're running a business, building a property, owning a home, that you're not going to find that you end up spending more time on the compliance side of your business than on the actual productive side. And I get this all the time. I was talking at the Central District Field Days just yesterday to some folks that run a forestry business. And they said, we've now actually got more people that work on the compliance side than the productive side. And if we want to ask ourselves, why do we struggle to afford medicines? Why are we worried about affording defence? Why are we worried about the future of an ageing population and healthcare and pensions and stuff that are difficult to afford? Well, the only way that we can square those circles is through greater productivity. I would argue one of the biggest problems with productivity is the amount of time we spend on compliance, and it costs us in 3 ways. One is the actual cost of money and time, filling out forms, getting consents and so on. 2 is the things that just don't go ahead, because people have been burnt by that, and so they say, well, look, actually, it's not worth it, so you miss out on those opportunities. And 3, and perhaps most important of all, is the way that our culture changes. So, for example, for my money, Edmund Hillary was the greatest New Zealander ever, certainly that I've met, and I've been to the walls where, as I understand it, he began learning to climb. At that school, they've now put up signs saying you can't climb. Now, you think about that for a moment. We've taken a culture of over-regulation that gets us to the point where we probably couldn't produce one of, if not our greatest ever citizen, because we just say you're not allowed to do it. So it's the immediate cost of doing business. It's the cost of business that doesn't get done at all. But in the long term, it's kids growing up without heroes and without examples of what can happen when you take a risk and try and make a better tomorrow.
We will talk about the regulatory standards bill when you introduce it. So you're in the drafting process at the moment, having had that discussion document out. We'll follow that progress throughout the year. The Ministry of Regulation has published its regulatory reviews into early childhood education and agricultural products. The next review focuses on hairdressing and barbering. Why did you choose that sector?
It's one that's been neglected for a long time and has quite a lot of quite crazy sort of rules about having to have different hand basins for different reasons, even though no one in their right mind would actually do that. That makes it harder to open up new salons. There's a lot of rules that are so crazy no one even follows them. For example, they're not technically supposed to give anyone a glass of wine while they're getting their foils done. Obviously, they just do that. And it's an example of where the Ministry of Regulation, as they have with early childhood, as they have with agricultural and horticultural products, go in and say, look, what is eating you guys? What would you like to be changed? And often what happens is that the rules and the regulations are coming at them from multiple different departments. It's an opportunity to say, look, actually, a whole lot of rules you're required to follow aren't needed. Let's get rid of those, and then you can get back to doing more of whatever it is you do, cutting and colouring, bringing in products so you have better, more environmentally friendly sprays for your apples, or looking after young New Zealanders at early childhood education. More of that and less of the compliance activity.
What do you make of Doge in the US?
Well, good luck to them. I mean, a lot of people look at what they're doing and they say, oh, look, that's amazing, why don't you just do that? I think what they may discover is that the proof of the pudding is in the eating. I think the American system in particular is set up with checks and balances to make it very, very difficult. And this is what George Washington and the founders wanted, is no one can become a dictator in their political system. So look, they've certainly made all the right noises, but let's see how they go. I look at what we've done with early childhood education. I mean, we've gone in, we've talked to 2,500 people. We've actually, produced about 150 pages, 15 different recommendations, got Cabinet to sign off on that. We're now implementing it. We're not going to slash and burn, we're not going to harm child safety. Actually making regulations better is not so much a matter of just go and slash and burn, see what happens. It's a matter of ask what rules are in place that make sense, which rules are in place that maybe don't make sense. From there, do your best.
Will New Zealanders notice any difference when you become Deputy Prime Minister?
I think what's important is that for a group of New Zealanders who frankly were beaten down by a government that promised kindness and inclusion, but actually was anything but. If you're a landlord, if you're a small business owner, if you're a licensed firearm owner, if you're a farmer, basically anyone trying to make a difference in their own life, often you got marginalised and beaten down by the government.
They're still being marginalised and beaten down by the current Deputy Prime Minister?
Well, no, but I think a lot of those people who chose to give their party vote to ACT, because we were saying, look, actually, we think each person should be treated alike in dignity and should have an opportunity to make the most of their time on earth, regardless of your background. People who think that will say, well, okay, look, our guy's in this role. I think that is quite important as a symbol that this country ultimately does practice democracy and things work out. And who knows, look, it may give a bit of opportunity to have a bit more influence on the way the government goes. But to be honest, we're already 3 sheets to the wind on that particular metric.